Let's bring it right now from the site of last night's Republican debate. Presidential candidate and former New Jersey governor Chris Christie. Chris, roll tide. Alabama, obviously.
Roll tide, baby.
You're the home of the greatest college football team this year, and so that's very exciting. I wanted to ask you about last night, and I just got to say, all the screaming, all the shouting, and all the screaming and the shouting in the Sean Hannity debate, it just turns Americans off. You seemed to get that, 15 minutes into the debate. Talk about what you saw from up there.
Well, what I saw are three people who are in the land of make-believe. Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis and Vivek. Well, look, Vivek, let's just end the conversation about him here. He's like a drunk driver on the debate stage. I mean, this is a guy who you never know where he's going to go and what he's going to make up next, what lane he's going to swerve into. But with Ron and Nikki, they're in a make-believe thing that somehow this contest is between the two of them. The contest between the two of them is for, who's going to be the first loser. And I thought last night they both didn't acquit themselves very well at all to pretend somehow that they can't talk about Donald Trump. I mean, Ron DeSantis tied himself into like a Philly pretzel, being unwilling to say whether Donald Trump is fit or unfit for the office. He refused to say whether he would send troops to Taiwan or not if China attacked. And he refused to say whether he would send troops to Gaza if there was a reasonable plan to try to rescue the American hostages. I mean, at some point you got to answer a damn question and not just keep talking about, what you did in Florida. Quite frankly, you're not running for governor of Florida again, Ron. You're running for president of the United States. And that's for Nikki last night. I mean, I didn't know whether she was really going to answer questions or not, or just keep talking about her donors. Look, this race is against Donald Trump, Joe. You know that. And I'm the only one on that stage who's willing to take him on. And what I'd ask Republican voters who are discontent with Trump is, who do you want to be the last person on that stage who shows they have the skill, the ability, and the guts to take him on? And I think last night showed that pretty clearly.
So, Governor Christie, speaking about the people on that stage last night, there were four of you up there. If someone dropped in from outer space with a marginal interest in public life in America and watched that debate, I'm pretty sure within 15 to 20 minutes of watching the debate, they would be saying, okay, who doesn't belong and why? So it would look like you didn't belong up there because you were different than the other three and that you were taking on the principal candidate for presidency, Donald Trump. Why were you there?
I'm here because this race started off with 13 people, and we're really down to the final four because Vivek can't be counted. Last night, he was once again showing himself to be Donald Trump's wingman, somehow auditioning for Secretary of Commerce in a Trump administration. In the end, I'm there because the truth needs to be told, Mike. And the American people need to hear the truth, and they're not going to take it in until they hear it over and over and over again. Because unlike me and you, who the center of our lives beside our families are politics and baseball, unfortunately, not everybody else has the same point of view. So I've got to keep at it. I'm going to keep at it. Patience and persistence will win this race. And I think what Republican voters decided, that will decide after last night is, who do they want to be the last person on stage when Donald Trump ultimately shows up? And I think I showed last night not only that I'm more prepared than any of those three people to be president of the United States by actually directly answering questions, but also I'm the only one who has the guts to take on Trump.
Hey, Governor, it's Heilman here. Just to stay on this point, if you look at you have been consistently the only person who's been willing to take on Donald Trump. You are also, I think it's just undeniable, someone who's been pretty, from the data that we see, are pretty unpopular among Republicans now in the current state of the party. There are a lot of people who just have very, very negative views. They've heard your message. They don't seem to really like it. I commend it. I think your message is you're speaking truth, and I think you're doing the right thing. But it doesn't seem like there's much of a receptive audience for it in the party. Can you point to anything tangible that suggests that I'm wrong, that there actually is a welcoming, a willing audience among Republican voters, this Republican Party in 2024, heading into 2024, that gives you an opening to really become the nominee of this party.
Yeah, because you're going to watch how I do in New Hampshire. I'm going to do extraordinarily well in New Hampshire. I'll move from there to Michigan and do extraordinarily well in Michigan. And then once again, Heilman, you'll try to convince everybody that you saw it coming all along. So, like, that's fine. That's why they pay you to do the things that you do. But fact is
not
that
all
at
the
this
things
point
that
in the
he
race,
does. There are a lot of things he does, Governor, that nobody pays for. In fact, he's encouraged not to. But go ahead.
Joe, a very good point, Joe. Point well taken. I'll say this. At this point in the race 8 years ago in Iowa, right after Thanksgiving, Ben Carson was 10 points ahead. And Ted Cruz was at 7%, and he wound up winning the Iowa caucuses. The last time we saw a New Hampshire poll back in September, 60% of the Republicans in New Hampshire said they would never vote for me. Then in November, that was down to 47%. So I guess never really didn't mean never. So, John, you're smarter than to think that a race remains static. I think I moved things last night. I think we'll see that reaction in New Hampshire. And the fact is that, all these other folks should be considering why they're still in the race. They're not taking on the front runner. They're all in double digits in the early states. I'm in double digits in New Hampshire and essentially tied for second place. So, they should be asking themselves, what's their path to beating Donald Trump? Or is the path they're trying to beat either to Donald Trump's cabinet or to the 2028 race? And that's the sense that I get both from Nikki Haley and from Ron DeSantis, is that they're more concerned about not angering some Trump voters for 2028 when they don't believe he'll be a candidate again than they are about trying to prevent him from ruining this country as president over the next 4 years, or allowing someone like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to have another 4 years. I'm in this race to win it, John.
Governor, good morning. To that exact point, there is that theory out there that watching last night that Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis are playing for 2028, that Vivek Ramaswamy, with his cynical plays to the lowest common denominator with conspiracy theories, wants to be secretary of something in the Trump administration. You were on this show just last week saying you believe firmly that Donald Trump will be convicted in the federal case against him in the 2020 campaign. Is that playing in your decision, if you have the momentum, if you have the money, to stay around as long as you can in case that happens, to be the one standing there?
Yes, that's exactly right, Willie. And that's why anybody who wants to make sure there's somebody left who will actually tell the truth about Donald Trump and not be afraid to even breathe his name. Nikki Haley last night was talking about chaos on drama as if, he's an innocent victim. That's like the arsonist saying, for some reason, burning buildings follow me wherever I go. I mean, we know why Donald Trump has this chaos and drama. It's because he creates it. You want someone to be around when this thing really falls apart, then go to chrischristie.com, donate to me, keep me on the stage, and keep me in this debate. I'm going to do it. I told you, Willie, last week that you got to be around the rim to get the rebound. And when Donald Trump is convicted of multiple felonies, so he can't even vote for himself if he were the nominee, people are going to remember that I've been the guy since early June that's been telling the truth about him consistently, whether I get cheered like I do in New Hampshire or whether I get some boos like I did last night in Alabama. If you're afraid of getting booed, imagine what you're going to feel like when Vladimir Putin tries to undress you the first time sitting at a bilateral meeting.